Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's webinar, Justice GPS, Assessing Your Skills to Navigate Yourself to a Career in Justice and Public Service. This is being presented by myself. My name is Tiffany Zapula and I am a career counselor here at Berkeley College Online, working primarily with criminal justice and legal studies candidates. I wanted to make this webinar because in my time working with various students from various backgrounds and different majors, I found that the field of justice was one of the toughest for them to really navigate. If you're an accountant, you usually have a pretty clear career path. You're either going to do audit or you're going to become a CPA. If you're even a legal studies candidate, then you will probably go in to be a paralegal or you'll become an attorney. Many majors have very clear career paths, but when it comes to justice, I felt that a lot of candidates I was working with were really struggling in terms of assessing their skills and seeing how those fit into the larger field of justice. So I'm really hoping that this webinar will be helpful not only for current students who are just coming into the major and trying to decide what they want to do, but also for alumni who, maybe after graduation they're still a little lost in terms of direction. And for our alumni, I am going to discuss how to apply for positions with the state and also at the federal level. Okay, so this webinar is going to be divided into 4 distinct sections: preparedness, possibilities, potential, and public service. In terms of preparedness, we're going to be discussing how this field is really more of a lifestyle. It's very different from other fields because it's not just about what you have on your resume. It really is your character, especially the amount of integrity that you're going to bring to this field. And as you'll see when we discuss the application process, it's very non-traditional depending on the type of position. We're also going to discuss briefly some of the possibilities in the field, and most importantly, the skills alignment. How do your skills really align with the different career possibilities in this field? And lastly, we are going to briefly go over how to apply specifically for positions at the state and federal level, as these are very different than just applying for a position through Indeed.com or any other job site. So to get started, I want to give you a little background in that I've been working with students in this major for several years now. I've really been a frequent participant at the Morris County Prosecutor's Office Law Enforcement Career Series in Morris County, New Jersey. This is a program that really brings professionals from all shades of law enforcement. It brings in recruiters from the FBI, the DEA, various other federal agencies. And so through this program, I've really gotten to do a lot of networking and learn a lot about what recruiters in this field are looking for. And one thing they always say to me is, this is not a job, it's a lifestyle. This really comes into play when you're looking at a background check. All Berkeley College students who come into the Justice Studies major must sign an agreement when they come into the major that they will accept that they need to do a background check for most internship and job positions in this field. Why a background check? Because it's not just about what you bring in on your resume. It's not just about your work history or your technical skills. It's about who you are as a person. Most of the positions in this field are going to require you to have upstanding character, a great deal of integrity, and of course the ethics that are needed to work in the field of public service. So we're going to discuss just 3 top traits that I think are really essential for you to have coming into this field. And I want you to really think about these things carefully and ask yourself whether at this point in your career you possess these 3 traits. The first one, of course, is integrity. Again, it's not about your skills, but your character. Expect background checks, polygraph tests, and other exams used to evaluate who you are. Of course, if you are going directly into law enforcement, you will be subject to a polygraph, the lie detector test, as we call it. One of the things that a lot of candidates say to me is, why do I have to pay for some of these positions? Why do I have to pay for a police exam? Why do I have to pay for a civil service exam? It's because they want to make sure you're very serious about this, that you've thought about this as a field. Understand that if you're coming into this position, you're really getting hired for life. This is not the type of job where you come into it for a year and then leave, especially if you're applying for law enforcement or a position at the federal level. These are positions that offer a pension. They offer an early retirement age. That means that recruiters, aside from the fact that this is, a field where you're working to enforce the law, they really have to make sure that you're serious about this and that you have upstanding integrity and character. Another trait, responsibility. Extremely high levels of responsibility because you are literally in charge of protecting people's lives in most cases. Even if you're in, say, a case management or a counseling position, you're directly responsible for much of an individual's well-being and mental health. This is an enormous responsibility. Anything that you're doing must be extremely detail-oriented, and there is really no margin for error. Our Dean Lenore Mollet, usually says that in the classroom, that's the place where you can make mistakes, because you cannot make mistakes on the job in this field. One of the things that I was part of a few weeks ago is I was part of a training for rescue management, and I remember watching this entire video that kind of showed a walkthrough of a school shooting and what you would do if you were in that situation. And I thought to myself, could I trust myself to be the one to come to someone's rescue? Think about that question. Are you at a stable point in your life where you feel mentally stable, physically stable, financially stable? Do you feel ready in your own life to be able to take on the responsibility of protecting somebody else? Really ask yourself that before you start applying to these positions. All too many times I have worked with candidates who were just going through some difficult times in their life, and they really didn't even have time to apply for a position. They didn't have the time or the energy to write a cover letter or to endure the extremely long application process for a federal job. If you can't even make it to the application stage, you're not ready for a career in this field. And lastly, persistence. Depending on the type of position, the hiring process is long and intense. Later on, when we're discussing some different possibilities, you'll see that there's opportunities in the public sector as well as the private sector. Private sector jobs are usually a bit quicker in terms of the hiring process. It might take a few weeks for recruiters to screen and interview and hire. But if you're looking at law enforcement, which requires a long battery of tests and a long waiting period, if you're looking at civil service, in which case some of the exams are only offered every 2, 3, or 4 years, this is a very long process, and you have to be persistent once you zero in and focus on the type of position you want. And again, recruiters are hiring for serious candidates and lifelong employees, so understand that that's the reasoning behind these hiring processes. So next, we're going to do an overview of the different types of careers in the justice system. I'm sure you've learned all of this in your classes already, so I'm just going to briefly go through this, but understand that there are career opportunities at every point in the justice system from start to finish. The first starting with, of course, law enforcement, and really before that is prevention, and we'll talk about that as well. But generally speaking, it begins with surveillance and law enforcement, right? Keeping an eye out for wrongdoing, keeping an eye out for offenders, and then of course apprehending them. Then it goes into the court system. It goes later into probation and parole, then into corrections and reentry, and lastly, which is one most people don't think about, reintegration into the community, right? Once ex-offenders are released, they have to, get job support, they have to get counseling, they might need other special referral services. So this is really, I think, an end of the justice system many people don't think about in terms of career. Among these 5 points in the justice system, careers usually fall into either public service, so those usually at the state and federal level, or civil service, or they fall with private employers. And we'll discuss again some of the broader possibilities there. Somewhere in between, you also have the nonprofit sector as well. So really the only difference between all of these is who's specifically paying you. Are you getting paid by a private employer, or are you getting paid by the government? And of course with a nonprofit, you're getting paid by a private employer, but of course it's filing as a nonprofit status. So just to go into some of the opportunities, I will give you the time, of course, to read over this list, but I grouped this because I thought that this was the easiest way to really look at these types of careers from start to finish. So in terms of surveillance, security, law enforcement, and investigations, I just want to highlight a few of these because really when students speak with me and they say, oh, I really want to do police. Okay, police obviously is one of the first things individuals think of when they think of law enforcement. But there's also prison security and corrections. There's also border patrol, transportation security. A big one that many people don't think of is campus safety. Schools like Rutgers and other big state schools, they have their own campus safety departments, and they have management level positions there as well as actual regular law enforcement positions. So this is something to really think about when you're trying to expand your options. Maybe you're waiting to sit for a police exam, or you're waiting to go through academy. This is really something that you can apply for and you can start doing right away as it's in the private sector. Another thing that people don't think about, dispatchers. Who are the guys that are actually calling out who needs to respond to emergencies? This is a really great entry-level position that you can do because it typically only requires a bachelor's degree or possibly even an associate's, but it's a great way to get a foray into the field. Background screening and background checks. One of the major employers is Sega Morpho. They do a lot of background screening and fingerprinting. Again, another really great way to get experience in the field. Insurance claims. Yes, believe it or not, insurance claims falls into the field of justice because you're doing investigations. And then, of course, there's forensic science, forensic accounting, forensic psychology. We move on through the justice system. Of course, you have the courts. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on the courts because we really do have the legal studies major here at Berkeley, and that will be kind of a discussion for another time. Now, of course, we do also have students who come to major in criminal justice specifically because they have an interest in criminal law. They're not interested in working in a civil law office. They really want to do criminal law. And so for that reason, I did list that on here. So, of course, the most common profession would be paralegal, defense attorney, prosecutor, would all, be useful with your criminal justice major. Of course, judicial clerk, translator is a big one. We'll talk a little bit more about language skills later on because they are one of the most important skills to have in this field. Couple things that people don't think about, caseworker and case manager, someone who is really in charge of referring individuals to the appropriate services they need. Of course, probation officer and parole officer, court-appointed advocates, and going on down the list, really back into the reintegration and reentry system, substance abuse rehab counselors. For any kind of counseling role, you're really going to want to go on to grad school to get further education for that. It's very difficult to get a counseling position with a bachelor's. Employment support, of course, helping those who have been institutionalized find work and gainful employment. It's a very difficult job. I myself actually did this for a few years, and it's difficult to find work when you have a criminal record. So this is really, really meaningful work, and it really, if you really are in this field because you want to help people, I would highly suggest looking into that as a possibility. And then, of course, counseling, all means of social work, prevention services. You could actually work for a community program whose main goal is to keep kids out of trouble. Believe it or not, in this you are playing a really important role in the justice system because you're trying to prevent crime. And, of course, there's a variety of other rehabilitative services in the nonprofit sector as well. So, now that we've gone over various types of careers in the justice system, I really wanted to highlight a specific type of career that I get a lot of questions about from students. Many times I'll be speaking with a student who has really done all 4 years here at Berkeley and then says to me, I want to be a forensic specialist. I said, okay, forensic science? They say yes. I say, okay, great. What credits do you have in a hard science? And they kind of look at me like they don't know what I'm talking about. So I feel like, when it comes to forensics, much of the understanding that students get is from TV shows, crime shows. They don't really understand what the specific path is that they need to take in order to be successful in this field. So I have welcomed a special guest to this webinar. Her name is Imani Powell. She is a member of the Association of Women in Forensic Science, which based most of its events out of Philadelphia. And she is also the founder of Forensics Uncut. So I'm going to ask her a few questions, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about how she has become successful in this field and what she thinks students can do to be successful as well. So welcome, Imani. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Okay, do you have your mic unmuted? Let me unmute you here. Okay. Can you say hello?
Yes, hello.
All right, perfect. I can hear you perfectly. So I'm going to start off with my questions here. So Imani, what we would like to know first is what made you initially interested in a career in forensics?
Well, not a surprise, but television. When I was in high school, CSI Miami, CSI New York, they would have marathons at night. So of course I had a bedtime, but my grandmother and I would like watch the CSI shows till like 4 o'clock in the morning, just because they were so interesting.
Okay, so good to know. I think a lot of students are on board with you in terms of what sparks their interest, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. So that being said, since there are, I think, so many misconceptions about this field, what steps would you suggest students take to make sure they have the proper mindset and qualifications to pursue this type of career?
It takes a lot of motivation within yourself. Going through college with just a hard science, and depending on the school that you attend, they may have a forensics program, and usually that is countered with, or it's coupled with another science, so biology or chemistry, on top of the forensic science degree. So either way, the sciences are going to be crucial, they're going to be very hard, and you really have to say that you really want this at the end of the day, because when you get into something like organic chemistry or quantitative analysis, you're like, do I really want this? It gets really challenging. You start to question, but just having the knowledge that this is what you really want to do and to move forward, that'll definitely help push you through. And also, a good step just to get a feel of what the field is like. Of course, internships are the best way to go. But if not, if you're a freshman or even if you're a senior, you should at least start networking. So you should go to any conferences in your area, any networking events. You can just Google them all. Just keep Googling forensic science conferences, anything that you may be interested in, and that'll definitely help you get a good step forward. Because then people already in the field will be able to recognize you, and they'll say, oh, you look like you're very motivated and you're very determined to know what this field is about, so let me help you out. We have an opening here, or I know somebody there. The door is always open.
Wonderful advice, Imani. Again, can't agree enough that character plays a big role in this, right? Not just who you are on paper. Absolutely. So my next question for you is, what common myth about forensics would you like to debunk?
That was a difficult one. Let's see. There's a lot of myths. Well, the most common statement I get as a forensic science major and as someone who's done an internship in the field is it just like CSI? Is it just like Bones? Is it just like that? And the only thing that I can say that's false about that statement, with it being just like it, is that one person doesn't do all of those jobs. So you see the person out in the crime scene picking up the evidence, and they also have a gun, and then you see them back in the lab analyzing the evidence. That's totally unrealistic in the field, but it does in fact happen. So the chain of custody and the order that things happen are pretty similar, and it's a little bit more glamorized. Labs look completely different because they're private and they're kept away from the public on purpose. So they don't have all these beautiful glass windows, and it's not completely open to the public and people can't just walk through. It's usually closed up like a classroom in a building or something.
Right.
And then you have the people that are out on the crime scene, and those are completely separate people analyzing the evidence, and that takes hours in itself. So, there's definitely different portions of the process of completing any type of crime scene.
Right. Very good, understood. So I'd like to close out our little cameo appearance here. Imani, could you give us your top 3 recommended resources? This can be organizations, websites, and please do also give a little plug on Forensics Uncut so everyone knows what it's about. What 3 recommended resources would you advise students to check out right now if they want to pursue a career in forensics?
Right now, okay, so for New Jersey in particular, or even internationally, I would say definitely look up the website aafs.org. That's the Academy of Forensic Science. And they're pretty much the hub. They have a link, all the links to any and all of the associations accompanied with forensic science. Also, AWIFS, which is Association of Women in Forensic Science. They definitely give a different outlook on what forensic science is. There's real accounts of what the people do in the field and how they feel about it. And also the New Jersey International Association of Identification, I believe. So it's NJIAI. If you look that up, and they also have a conference coming up in October that I would really, really love for college students to come out to because it's definitely necessary. So those 3, I would say, to definitely look up on the internet to get a good idea of what the field is like and how professional it is and what kind of events go on.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Imani. So again, she didn't do a little plug about Forensics Uncut,
yes.
But go ahead.
Forensic Uncut, yes. It's very new, and it's definitely a good representation of the struggles of an everyday college student in forensic science or any science major, and also, to help out the high school students where they are lacking. So a lot of inner city kids won't be able to understand the opportunities that they have in forensic science. They won't be able to see who they are because forensic scientists are not just out in public all the time like you'll see other people in different fields. So the goal is to educate, high school and college students, and to help my colleagues out with figuring out what internships they're interested in, to figure out what kind of field they want to go into, because there's not only 3 types of things that you can do with that degree. You can go so many different places with it, and I think that's important for us to know so we can grow and understand and be successful in the field.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you again so much, Imani. I really appreciate your time speaking with us. And for students who are watching this and even alums, I hope that from hearing from Imani, you understand that there are a lot of ways to get involved in this field. If you do not have the hard science background, discuss with your career counselor what you'll need to do even to pursue this. If you are through your associate's or bachelor's degree in criminal justice, what you will need to do to pursue forensics as a field in terms of higher education at the master's level. So yes, thank you so much, Imani. We're going to say bye-bye if you won't mind turning off your webcam for now. But thank you again so much, and everybody please do check out Forensics Uncut and the Association of Women in Forensic Science. Because this is a webinar, we don't have clickable links, but you can easily find those through Google. So thank you again, Imani. We're going to switch back into the rest of our program here. So yes, that's an overview again of the many possibilities in this field. Now, in terms of course, specific employers and specific job descriptions, you'll definitely want to connect with your career counselor on those. We are going to dive now into a section on your skills. One thing that I always suggest students do is really take a look at their skills. Usually when you come to Berkeley and you do the criminal justice major, you're getting a really solid sociology background, and you will take some psychology classes as well. You'll learn all about the system, you'll have a really great background as to how everything works, but you really need to be able to bring specific skills in order to make yourself marketable in this field. So I've really divided this into a pretty clear overview of how you can assess your individual skills that make you unique and apply those to specific positions within the field. I want to start with technical, and I will say that first and foremost, these are the most valuable skills in the field. When I speak with recruiters with the FBI, they always tell me we really, really need individuals who have technical skills. We don't just need a criminal justice degree. While the degree is very useful because it gives you a great overview of the system, you need to have a secondary skill set that makes you stand out from other applicants. And technical skills, as you might imagine, are very much in high demand. So the first type of skill, of course, is we learned a lot from Imani, biology, chemistry, and physics, any of the hard sciences. These will prepare you for careers in forensic science, crime scene analysis, ballistics. A lot of people forget about ballistics, analyzing the path of a bullet and what kind of impact it had. You need to have a background in physics for that. And of course, being a medical examiner. It's not a glamorous job, but definitely a very important part of analyzing crime. So the secondary focus would be financial. If you happen to have transferred in any credits, or maybe you have an associate's degree in accounting or business or financial services, this is a hot field. Forensic accounting, very much in demand. They need to have individuals who can look for fraud and identify it based on companies' financial documents. And of course, in information systems. I can honestly say that for any government contractor, if you take some time and look through their job postings, almost every single posting is in IT. We do have that as a major here. We have it as a minor. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking for a technical skill set, if you have an interest in computers, again, even if you've just been watching TV and said, oh, it looks interesting to be a computer hacker, whatever that secondary skill might be, if you're into IT, definitely look into pursuing this in the field of justice. Again, it's a great entryway into cybersecurity, investigations, and of course, internet surveillance. For those of you who are not so technical minded, there's of course the sociolinguistics skill set. Now psychology and sociology, of course, the program itself, the major, is based on this foundation, but if you are able to go and pursue some higher education, you can be licensed to be a counselor. Of course, forensic psychology, profiling, casework, even advocacy and community reintegration. It's very useful to have that sociological mindset. You have to be able to work with very difficult populations, and that's something that the folks in their average day-to-day have trouble with. So if you really have kind of an empathetic personality and you're good at working with people, then look into these types of careers as a path. Writing, of course, writing skills are critical in any kind of job. Even as a police officer, you need to be able to write reports. So you need writing skills regardless, but if writing is really your creme de la creme and that's what you're best at, you may want to look into specifically a law career. If you're able to digest those very sophisticated words and technical language, look into becoming a paralegal or eventually an attorney. Of course, court clerks and court reporters are very much in demand. Usually to be a court reporter, you do need an additional certification, so be sure to talk to your career counselor about what you'll need to make you a great candidate for that field. And believe it or not, you actually can find a great career in this field with a creative mindset. They do need court and crime scene artists and photographers, which is, I think, a career field that people don't often think about. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you take beautiful, scene pictures and post them on your Flickr that you're perfectly prepared for this. But if you really do want to try and apply some of your creative skills, that's a career path you might want to think about. And I just want to take a moment to discuss, from, again, my discussions with individuals in the field, the two most important skills that you need to bring to any position. One of them is second language ability. Whenever I speak with individuals at the prosecutor's office, those in law enforcement, they say over and over again, if you speak a second language and it's not listed on your resume, what are you doing? Everybody needs interpreters, especially if you speak Spanish. You must list that on your resume, and that is instantly going to put you above everybody else who's applying, because that is an extremely crucial skill to have, especially living in America and knowing that that's an extremely in-demand language. There are certain languages that are very much in demand at the federal level. They're called critical need languages. You can Google Department of Homeland Security, pull up their website, and look for critical need languages. One of these is Arabic. Obviously, given the state of the world that we're in, we really need individuals who are fluent in this language. So if you speak a critical need language, you need to definitely look into some positions with the State Department. And of course, physical and mental endurance. Anything in law enforcement, you need to be physically fit. You need to be able to pass physical tests. I say mental endurance, that's really a part of any of these jobs, but if you are, just working in community reintegration, if you're working at a nonprofit, you need to be able, again, to work with difficult populations. So, again, really ask yourself whether you have these abilities for second language ability. See if that's something that you can develop. If you don't have it yet, take some classes, do Rosetta Stone, find a language partner. It's definitely not hard to pick up Spanish, given the types of communities that we all live in. Now that we've gone through a skills assessment, I want to take a few minutes, because we're running short on time, to briefly go over the application process for state and federal positions. Now, most of our Berkeley students do reside in New York and New Jersey, so that will be the focus here. But if you are located in another state, please be sure to contact your career counselor in regards to applying for positions in that state. I really want to emphasize here that you should be dreaming big, but starting small. Understand that you need to start off with an entry-level position if you do not already have experience in the field. And I have to interject this with a meme, which I think really explains everything here. One does not simply become a detective by applying online. I will oftentimes speak with students who are in the third year of their bachelor's degree, have no experience in the field, and say, I want to be a detective. And I have to respond back and say, that's great. You need to have 5 to 10 years of experience in law enforcement first. If you want to be a detective at the public level, you need to have experience in law enforcement. If you want to become a private investigator, you still need at least 5 years of investigations experience. This is not something that happens overnight. I encourage all students, if they're currently enrolled, to dream big, have that as your main goal in mind, but realize that you need to start at level 1, so to speak, before you get to level 10. So I'm going to go through a few tips on state hiring. So understand that it varies by state. Some positions are civil service positions, others are not. To give you a brief overview, in New Jersey, the system is all over the place. If you want to work for a police department in one town, they may have an online application or an exam directly. If you want to work for a police department in another town, they may be a civil service jurisdiction, and you may have to sit for the civil service exam. New York is a little bit more centralized, thank goodness. Most positions are civil service for New York. But just understand that the best way to figure out how to get into a state position, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's just a public agency, the best thing to do is do your research and speak with your career counselor about it to figure out what the path is. And of course to do an internship so that you can learn directly from somebody who's done it. I do want to mention that for New York and New Jersey, there is a cutoff age for law enforcement. I once received a call from a student who explained that she was 39 years old and wanted to become a parole officer. Unfortunately, I had to tell her that's not possible. She is past the age cutoff. You must be 37 by the time of your appointment in a law enforcement position in the states of New York and New Jersey. Unfortunately, there's no way to get around that. If you are past that cutoff age, we can definitely discuss some different options for you that may not specifically be in public law enforcement. Understand that the process for becoming a law enforcement officer, particularly police at the municipal level or the state level, it's, again, not as easy as just sitting for the exam. After the exam, you will typically undergo a battery of tests, and then you will go on to academy. Again, this varies slightly by state, so be sure to check with your career counselor on this. Exams for civil service and police tests typically open every few years. I'm currently working with students who took a police exam a year ago and are just now hearing back. So again, understand this is a very long process, but it is something that you should be preparing yourself for, before you actually start in the field. And again, long hiring period for state and federal positions, and we'll discuss that a little bit more in a minute. I am going to go through applying for positions through Usajobs. As a little bit of background, usajobs.gov, this is the portal run by the Office of Personnel Management for all federal agency hiring. This is where you will find internships. This is where you will find positions with any federal agency. When you go through these positions, you will notice that the pay rates are called GS levels. This is the rate of pay by role. These rates are preset by the Office of Personnel Management according to the qualifications required by the position. Please note that there is a closing date, so if you do not apply by that date, obviously the posting will go down, so please be cognizant of that. Veterans, listen up. If you have veterans preference, and especially if you are classified as a Schedule A status, you should be logging in as a federal employee, not a citizen. This is very, very important because if you are under the VEOA status, you will have a lot more opportunities available to you. So again, if you have questions, please contact your career counselor specifically. Carefully read through the requirements and KPIs. Know that for these positions on Usajobs, the longer the resume, the better, because your resume must explicitly state that you meet all of the minimum requirements and key performance indicators for the position, or it will not be showing you as qualified. And one other thing that we're going to discuss when we go through the screenshots is, believe it or not, you actually can follow up with the agency if you receive a qualification notice. You actually can connect with a human on that. So let's go through a few screenshots so we can kind of put this all into practice. Unfortunately, I was not able to do this live. I have to go by screenshots, but we're just going to start with a position we have here with FEMA. I wanted to pull in positions that were mostly entry level. So if you see here, this is $16.14 to $24.17 per hour. That's, again, a pretty entry-level position. Don't look for anything far over GS7 level. Anything over GS7 is going to require several years of experience. If you're an alumnus who's several years out, or if you have existing military experience, you may be able to expand the types of positions you are eligible for. However, if you're an entry-level candidate, you're just coming out with your BA, with no existing related experience in the field, I definitely would not look for anything above the GS 5 to 7 range. So again, we have the pay rate here. You see the open period is stated. This position will close on January 23rd. However, note this little section here. It will close on January 23rd or the date the 400th application is received, whichever comes first. Since you don't know how many applications are being received, I would read this as apply as soon as possible. Don't wait until January 23rd in case this posting actually ends up being closed by then. Be sure to read the position information. This is a temporary position, not to exceed 2 years, so keep that in mind. Duty locations, they usually will have a list here, so this location is negotiable, but usually they may have a whole list of potential locations here. And who may apply? All U.S. citizens. Again, a quick note for veterans, this is a competitive position. This means it's open to everybody. So for this particular position, you will not be able to apply your veteran's preference. This is something important to look out for, because if you are a veteran with any kind of preference or special status, you want to try to apply for positions where you're going to get a bit of a leg up. Okay, again, these are the key requirements. These are the duties. This position is IT specialist in FEMA's reservist program. Be sure you carefully read all of these and ensure that whatever they are looking for, you have clearly stated in your resume and documentation. Qualifications required, experience with running, terminating, and testing network data cabling. You must have this explicitly stated in your resume. Again, it's okay if your resume is over 1 page for these types of position. You need to have this detail in here or it's not going to mark you as qualified. How you'll be evaluated, your resume, responses to online questions. This is a posting, and many postings are similar to this, where you're going to have to apply through Usajobs with your existing resume and documents, and you're also going to have to answer some questions externally on the FEMA website. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of this, but again, just be sure you carefully read over all of this. You'll need to have certain documents uploaded to Usajobs, and it's very, very specific. If you do not follow these instructions to a T, your application will not get seen by the agency recruiter. And lastly, to my point of being able to follow up, the agency contact info is usually stated here at the bottom. If you do receive, oops, sorry. If you do receive an email stating that you are eligible for the position and you don't hear back within about 2 weeks or so, it's perfectly okay to follow up with Christina Messenger here, or whoever the contact stated. So I just want to make one more note in terms of qualifications. This is for a different position. I believe this is a position, position at the GS6 level. It's a little bit higher than the one with FEMA. Many times you will see the qualification segment stated like this. It will say you need to have specialized experience equivalent to the GS06 level in federal service, and it'll give you some details here, or you will have an education requirement. Make sure if you see this or, this is the magical or, that you're carefully understanding and reading this qualification section. If you do not have this specialized experience, you can substitute education. Every posting is different. Some postings do not allow you to substitute education for experience. So be careful, ensure that you read this and understand it, and if you have questions, reach out to your career counselor. Okay, so that is an overview of Usajobs. I do want to give you a few statistics on OPM that I think bring to light much of what was discussed so far. Over here, 7%. This is the percentage of federal employees under the age of 30 as of 2013. It was more than 20% in 1975. What does this say? It says two things. One, the source that I brought this is from the Wall Street Journal actually, showed that many individuals under the age of 30 are not really interested in positions with the government because, much to everyone's surprise, positions in the private sector typically pay more. With the government you'll get some really great benefits, but if money is what you're after, especially if you're in business or a technical field, you may prefer to work in the private sector. The other part of this is that many of the positions that are at the federal level require several years of experience. Again, if you're coming out of school with your BA, there's not going to be a lot that you're qualified for at the federal level. So just understand that this is a limitation. Keep your eye out for those GS 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 level positions when they do come along. And by all means apply, but just realize that you need to be prepared. You need to have some existing experience for most of the positions on there. Just another fun fact here. 50%. This is the percentage of Secret Service agents who've had previous law enforcement experience. I wanted to add the statistic here because I want to emphasize that law enforcement is a really, really excellent path into various careers. Again, to be a detective, you need law enforcement experience. To work for any kind of protective federal agency, you really need to have law enforcement experience. Many positions in this field do start with law enforcement because, obviously if you're in law enforcement, you've been faced with many challenges already. You can work in high-pressure, difficult situations. So I just wanted to note this in here. And lastly, as we discussed, 87 days. The average time it takes the Office of Personnel Management to hire an individual. This was as of 2012, back when the president actually had a cap. He actually wanted OPM to be able to report all of their hires within 80 days. Now that cap has been removed, and OPM is focusing even more on the quality of candidates over their speed of hire. So this is probably taking even longer. Again, want to emphasize that if you are applying for these types of public sector positions, definitely look into options in the private sector if you need employment right away. Okay, so we don't have any current participants, but this is a recorded webinar. It will be posted on our LibGuides page, so contact information will be on that page, and you can certainly email any questions to us here in Career Services. I want to finish off our webinar today by sharing some useful links with you. Again, these aren't clickable because this is a recording, but hopefully you'll be able to follow these links, paste them into your browser. Bureau of Labor Statistics has a really excellent overview of how to use Usajobs. There's special hiring authorities for veterans. Again, if you're a disabled veteran, if you've been in the service for X amount of years, there's different, I guess I should say, special hiring authorities that will give you preference when you're applying for federal positions. The link is here for civil service announcements in New Jersey. The link is here for civil service exams in New York City. And there's a link here for public service careers in New York City. And again, in New York State Jobs FAQ as well. So all very important information for careers in the public sector, for careers in the private sector. Those will be posted, of course, on specific company websites, on job search websites like Indeed, and of course, through Berkeley College, Berkeley Connect. So I think that's all we have for tonight.